Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Sovereign Goddess podcast. Authentic conversations with modern medicine women and goddesspreneurs alike, inspiring you to build your queendom with grace. Oh my gosh, I am beyond thrilled for this episode and to chat with Arielle Ford. I have been reading her books probably for the past 8 years and reading about her and Debbie. And I was just talking in a previous episode about Debbie, and we recorded that back in January. And then to get the call that, hey, an email that like, hey, Debbie's new book is out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is no accident. And being someone who's so passionate about shadow work, and then also realizing and understanding that it's important for us to face our darkness in order to create the lives that we want. And I know Arielle here talks a lot about soulmates and that kind of connection too. But I love the whole story of how this book came to fruition. And the book we're talking about is her late sister, Debbie Ford's book, Your Holiness. And I can't put it down. It's so beautiful. And I love the fact that it's just a book of prayers that you can really just open up to anything. And I always say, like, what do I need? And I just open it up, and that's the prayer that I need. So thank you so much for being here. It means so much. And I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the work that your sister did and continues to do. And it's been such a beautiful blessing, really.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Sabrina.
Thanks. Okay, so I think it's so beautiful how this book really came to fruition, because you worked with James von Prague and you connected with him, and your sister came through and shared that you needed to release this book. And you were
actually,
right?
What happened was Debbie and I have been friends with James for longer than 20 years. And a little more than a year ago, he called to say that he had recently moved to San Diego, where we live. And he wanted my husband and I and my mom to come see his new house. And then he would give us a reading with Debbie. So, of course, we said yes. I'd love to see James and talk to Debbie. And when he did the reading, Debbie came through really quickly. And the first thing she said was, Arielle, you have to write a prayer book with me. And I said, no possible way. I don't want to write my own books, let alone write your book. It's like, no, you have to write a prayer book with me. It's like, yes, I'm not going to write a prayer book with you. And we had this whole long reading with him. And of course, all kinds of dead relatives came through with great messages. And then Debbie kept popping back in saying, Arielle, you have to write a prayer book with me. And 90 minutes into the reading, we were all getting sort of tired and hungry. And I said to James, she's never going to let this go. She's very persistent. I might need your help because you can hear her, but I can't. How in the world am I going to write a prayer book? So we agreed and we said, okay, Debbie, well, we don't know how this is going to happen, but yes. So as we were driving home, my husband said, I spent so much time with your sister. I took her to doctor's appointments and her chemo treatments. And I remember that she talked about having written some prayers. Why don't you call her office and maybe they have copies of them? And that would be the start of the book. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. So I get home and I send a 1-sentence email to her office that says, do you by chance have copies of any prayers that Debbie wrote? And they wrote back and said, we can do better than that. She wrote an entire manuscript. It's attached. Now, I was completely blown away because I have always been her sole literary agent. So for her to have written a book that I didn't know about was sort of mind-blowing. But I let that go for a second, and I opened the manuscript, and I read it in one sitting. It was 200 pages, fully edited, stunningly brilliant, filled with her original prayers, but also filled with a whole narrative about how prayer saved her life in her recovery from addiction, how to use prayer in every area of your life. And it also included some of her favorite prayers from Marianne Williamson and Emmett Fox and others. So I read this book, I put it down, and I pick up the phone and I call her editor at Harper One, Gideon. And all I say to him was, hi, Gideon, it's Arielle. And he says to me, oh my God, Arielle, I'm so glad you called. For the last 4 years, I've been feeling so guilty. Your sister always wanted to write a prayer book, and I always talked her out of it, and I feel so bad. And I started laughing. I said, well, don't feel bad, Gideon. Today's your redemption. Check your inbox. I just sent you the book. So, of course, they bought it. And now it's just come out. It's called Your Holiness. And all I had to write was the 5-page forward to the book, which is the story I just shared with you.
It was so beautiful.
Right? And through this, the magic of James Van Praagh and Debbie's insistence and persistence and her still bossing me around from the other side, this book now exists. And I have to say, this was her 10th book. And I believe it's the best thing she ever wrote.
Oh, it's so good. Because I've read so many of her other ones, and The Shadow Effect is on my table right now. And like, it's all tabbed up, and Courage, and so many of her other books. And this one is just so prolific in its own way.
You know what's special about this book is that if you're a highly sensitive person, as I'm sure your audience is, you can feel that she coded the book with love.
Oh.
You can actually just hold the book and experience the love. So it's just this magical thing. So I recommend to people that when you get Your Holiness, first of all, go to her website, debbieford.com, because you can order it there. And when you order it there, you get all these cool bonuses, including the chance to win a reading with James Van Praagh. But read the book front cover to back cover first, and then use it whenever you're looking for an answer. That's what I do.
It reminds me of like, that's how I worked a lot with Marianne Williamson's Illuminata. I would just like open up to a random page, and that was like the prayer I needed for the day.
Yes,
this is like so beautiful.
Marianne wrote the introduction for the book.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Stunning work. I know I've got my little tatted up copy.
Well, there's something that you shared that was really beautiful, and it said, sometimes it's just better to surrender to the magic and the grace of this thing called life. So you surrendered to this thing, this book, and you know it's had a life of its own. How have you feel that this surrender process has shifted your life?
Well, you know, I always knew that dying didn't mean people disappeared. I always understood that it just meant you let go of the body. Or at least I thought I understood that. Now there's so much proof, you know, that, you know, Debbie's consciousness is not still what it was before. It's actually grown, you know, that she has this new, bigger, grander perspective on what's needed. And in fact, I interviewed her about the book through James about a month ago. And I was just looking for information, because if I realized I was going to soon give the video away, it would have looked better. But in any event, we're now giving a half-hour video interview with Debbie away as part of the bonus package for the book, because I asked her, I said, you know, what have you learned about love on the other side? What have you learned about forgiveness? You know, how would you change the shadow process? You know, knowing what you know now. And she had, you know, we don't have time to go into all her answers right now, but she had these deep dish, you know, insights about what life is like. And the takeaway that I most recall from the interview was she talked about how judgmental we are, how we judge ourselves and others, and how that is the most toxic thing that we do as human beings, is to be in this ongoing state of judgment. And we really need to lighten up on ourselves, which is why she was so brilliant at teaching about not only our dark side, but learning to love and embrace our light side, which for most people seems nearly impossible, because they say, yes, I'm an angry, nasty, bitchy, envious, overbearing bitch. Those were what I used to shadow process did out of me. You know? But it's not often I would walk up to you and say, Sabrina, did you know that I am a deeply intuitive, incredibly kind, compassionate friend that would actually be the best friend you ever had if we were hanging out together? Now, of course, I would never say that to you.
All right, let's hang out now.
I'll tell you about, you know, how impatient I get and how judgmental I can be, and how, you know, I might be smiling at you, but I'm probably having some horrible thought about how much I hate your shoes or something.
Well, luckily I'm not wearing shoes right now, so that's not true.
I never wear shoes.
It's the California lifestyle, right?
Exactly, yeah. Shoes are by necessity only.
Yeah, I know, definitely. I know my life is Joshua Tree and Encinitas, so I get it. Okay, so it's really interesting because I feel like, she had such a very dark, she had a lot of demons that she had to really conquer through with her years of addiction and things like that. And I mean, that's why she was so profound with her work with the shadow, because she was able to master it in a
Yeah.
way of like really conquering it. And now that she's on the other side and she's able to like be free of those, and you're saying that like, she's sharing more wisdom than ever before. I feel like even with your work, you work a lot with soulmates and things like that. And things are shifting in relationships and these new paradigms and stuff like that. And a lot of like men, for instance, they're having, it's like a real rise of the divine masculine right now that's really healing to be more empathetic and more kind and things like that. And I know a lot of men in my life are having to face a lot of the shadows too. So I just
Well,
feel like,
I feel really bad for men these days. It's, because
it's tough.
there's, you know, trying to turn them into us is not a good idea. We need
Mm-hmm.
to encourage them to embrace their masculinity and learn how to put their sword in the ground while remaining respectful of the boundaries that women need. Like I was thinking the other day, if I was a 30-year-old single man dating, I'd be scared to death, because you can't date in the workplace, right? Imagine you want to kiss somebody and, a year later they say that you sexually assaulted them. I mean, do guys now have to ask girls, is it okay to kiss you? Maybe they do. So I can't think of a worse time in history to be a man, really.
Yeah. So then how do we, it's like books like this, I feel like can really support men and women, with their shadows and really coming back into their wholeness, because I just feel like there's so many men right now that are like kind of fragmented with who they could be, because being PC or like, the whole future is female thing, which I don't believe is true. I think it's collective male and female and all the other labels
Well,
where,
I think we want to all learn how to embrace both our masculinity and our femininity and shift into it at the proper time. I mean, when we're working, it's completely appropriate for us to be in our masculine energy.
mm-hmm.
We want to date or marry an alpha male. We're not going to have a good relationship if both of us are in our masculine energy. So it's
Mm-hmm.
about learning to dance in both worlds and being respectful of both worlds. And it's a growth process. The problem is there's so few role models of how to be. When I think about what's happening in the White House right now, Barack Obama was like, if he and Michelle aren't soulmates, I don't know what is.
Totally.
He was so respectful and so devoted. And yet she was a strong, powerful, smart woman who had a man who was devoted to her. And now we've got this, don't get me started on it, but he could be the poster child for, misogyny and everything that's wrong with, that dying breed. And let's hope they are dying out sooner than later. So it's a tricky thing, but, getting back to where does prayer fit into all of this?
Mm-hmm.
I think what's to be learned from Debbie's book is that prayer is a daily act of gratitude. It's a constant giving thanks. Whether it's as simple as, I'm so grateful that I woke up in San Diego and the sun was shining and the water was sparkling and I have fresh air to breathe and clean water to drink and friends to hang out with, as opposed to the kind of prayer religion teaches, which is, dear God, please send me my dream man and my dream job and I want it now, which of course we know doesn't work.
Yeah, it's so much about the being, and I know she touched a lot about that too. It's it's like focusing on how you can become, and that's a huge part of the prayer too, rather than like needing this, like the Native American prayer that she talked about, where it was like, they don't pray for rain. It's like they feel it on their body and they feel it on their tongue.
Another version of that story about a bunch of Native Americans were getting together to do a rain dance during a drought. And everybody showed up, but only one little boy brought an umbrella.
Oh,
that was his act of faith, to bring the umbrella. So that's what she's really asking us to do, to live these acts of faith.
mm-hmm.
Know and trust that the universe, God, Goddess, whatever you want to call it, always has our back. all we have to do is stop focusing on what's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
focus on what's right, and have gratitude for what's right, and then be in the present moment awareness that what we've asked for is already ours.
Beautiful. So, and we all have these, we're talking just now about the shadow that we're seeing right now, like in our current administration and the collective and things like that. And yes, we are human, and those are opportunities for us to grow and choose to be victorious over it rather than the victim, and seeing it as like the juice,
Listen, I've never been tested more. Every day I wish I could talk to Debbie about politics right now, because I've been I was her guinea pig in the early days of the shadow process. So trust me, I know, and I've been through it, and I've owned and embraced and found the gift of all parts of shadow, except now. Now there's just like
it's a test.
It's such a test that here's what I do. So every time CNN is on in our house, which is almost all day long, I find myself shouting obscenities at the TV. But to counterbalance it, after can I curse on your show?
I don't give a shit.
Okay, goddamn motherfucking piece of shit idiot, and I'm screaming at Trump on the TV. Then I want to breathe out seeds of love to the universe. I'm like, But what happens is I end up hyperventilating because I'm cursing so much. I'm like, just trying to balance it all out. I have to say, the breathing out seeds of love does help.
Because that's the thing too. We can't be spiritual bypassing what we're feeling either.
Well, no, we know that's what causes dis-ease,
right?
And reflux and all kinds of other uncomfortable sensations. So, it's about how can we appropriately allow ourselves to be where we are, but not wallow there. So I've come up with a process for myself that I call the 3-minute rule. So if I'm spiraling downward, what I do is I set my egg timer for 3 minutes, or I set the stopwatch on my phone for 3 minutes. And then I give myself 3 minutes to go further down the rabbit hole. I just say the most horrible, horrific, horrendous things to myself. No positive thinking allowed. And generally, I can't do it for 3 minutes, because at some point I start to laugh because my rational mind kicks back in and reminds me that all of the nasty things I'm saying to myself are not true.
There's a higher truth to that.
Yeah, but it's like letting the steam out of a pressure cooker.
Yeah, totally. So how is she reminding you on the other side of your holiness?
Since that whole incident with James, I can hear her better now. And every single morning I take a bath, and mostly she talks to me in the bathtub.
That's what my mom used to say about my grandpa on the other side.
Oh, really? Yeah. For some reason, the bathtub is the conduit to Debbie. So some days she has nothing to say, and other days she's really chatty, and some days she's giving me directions like go do this or go do that. And in the beginning, I used to doubt it a lot. And it was really uncomfortable, but I gave the messages, and every time I gave the messages, the feedback was, oh my God, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And now I've just learned to trust this, yucky, pushy, bossy little sister who's talking to me when I'm in the bathtub.
That's amazing. And so, yeah, you wrote this whole book, Love on the Other Side, too. That's a free ebook that you're giving people to help people really connect with that heavenly help for love and life. And, there's so many of us that have lost loved ones, whether they be partners or...
Yeah, the good thing you can do with that book, and you can get it for free at loveontheotherside.com, is you can ask your loved ones on the other side for help, for assistance. Now, of course, if abundance is your issue, if money's your issue, you don't want to ask your grandfather who filed for bankruptcy 3 times. You want to be laser about who you're asking for assistance. But I know lots of people who had lost a soulmate, and the soulmate on the other side sent them a new one. So the book is a combination of true stories of what happened when one soulmate died and sent the remaining one a new lover. And it's also how to ask your ancestors for help. And then woven in there is the story of Debbie's passing.
So beautiful. Yeah. And it's so interesting because to me, when I think of the medicine wheel, the East represents the ancestors and they come through in spirit guides. Like I see red-tailed hawks flying over my home all the time out here in Joshua Tree. And so I feel like even as we're becoming more increasingly sensitive, it's really important for us to continue to connect with our ancestors and our loved ones on the other side that, like we were talking about earlier, they don't have to worry about the bullshit of like this 3D physical reality.
Right. And the truth is, they're not going to help you unless you ask. You need
Right.
them permission. So that's something to know, because you would think, well, can't they see I'm struggling?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course they can see you're struggling. And they're there going, hey, pick up the phone, call me, tell me, give me permission to help you. Because that's all they need to know is that, listen, I need a sign, I need guidance, come to me in a
Mm-hmm.
dream. Let the next song I hear give me a hint or a clue,
Mm-hmm.
and you will get help that you can't even imagine.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I know with me, it's like I hear a certain song or I see a certain animal or a certain number, and that's to me like confirmation from a loved one on the other side, like you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one aunt who passed, oh God, about 15 years ago, but she always wore brooches that looked like ladybugs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though there really aren't ladybugs in our backyard, every once in a while I'll see one and I'll go, oh, Aunt Pearl's here. She came for a visit.
That's so amazing. So when you did this whole publishing process, I mean, since the book was already written and, she's had relationships with other things with publishers and things like that, how have you seen like this process of surrender? How has it really humbled you in a way?
Well, it's, in some ways made life more magical, because I always, like most people, I want to know what's coming next.
Of course.
I'm learning to live with uncertainty, but, and I don't go to psychics, because I've learned that they could be right and still I wouldn't feel good because I misinterpret what they say. So I've learned to just trust on a bigger level than I did before, that the next step is always unfolding in front of me, and I don't need to see 1 mile down the road. I just need to stay in this present moment, which is why, my favorite quote from A Course in Miracles is, in this moment, I have everything that I need. And it's always, always true as long as I'm in this moment.
Mm-hmm. That book changed my life too.
Amazing, huh?
Such a good one. So what has been some of the miracles that you've experienced from this process?
It's reconnected me with a lot of her students and coaches, because we put it out to all of them, and suddenly I'm getting Facebook posts or emails about how Debbie shows up for them, because I'm not the only one. She's super busy over there. I'm hearing from people who she never met or who just recently found her books, who didn't know anything about her, but she comes to them in dreams, she whispers in their ear, she's giving them directions. So that's, I think, the most fun part about it, is knowing that she's sort of all over the place, everywhere at once. And from what I understand, they don't sleep on the other side.
Interesting.
They don't eat and they don't sleep and they don't have sex. So that's sort of like the good part of being on Earth, but
Yeah.
I think the part about being on the other side is that for a lot of them, they live in this ongoing state of unconditional love and bliss. And they have this, ability to connect with us here on Earth and help us out.
That's so beautiful. So what would you say is the greatest thing she's taught you?
Oh, definitely the shadow work. There's no question. It was a painful process because she wasn't adept at languaging it. So often I thought she was crazy or she was being mean. But definitely the shadow work was, a turning point, very transformative. And I think with the book, the greatest lesson has been that it's really, really true. Love never dies. And I was talking to Marianne Williamson a few weeks ago, and I said to her, it's so crazy. I said, in the strangest way, even though Debbie and I were very close when she was here, I feel even closer to her now. And Marianne said, oh, not strange at all. After John Lennon died, somebody asked Yoko Ono, what's it like for her now that John's dead? And she said, well, before John died, we were together 90% of the time. Now we're together 100% of the time.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, because they don't have a lot of their other things to
There's
even
no
concern
density.
about. Yeah.
We're just here in this space if we're open to it. And there's never been a scary moment, and I'm also able to connect with other relatives in a way that I wasn't before. So sometimes, like, everybody in our family loves music. So when we go to concerts, I sometimes start to feel a little claustrophobic because it feels like everybody's in the seats with us. We're surrounded by all these music lovers.
That's amazing. I love that. I know my prayer for this book, really, because I've had a lot of family that has dealt with addiction, and I've had my own issues with drug abuse. And my prayer is that this book gets into the hands of so many people that are stuck with the opioid epidemic,
I really hope this gets out to those in recovery, because I know that through the 12-step programs, they understand surrender and prayer. But I think to be able to read a book like this from somebody who's been where they've been,
Mm-hmm.
And used prayer as the way out would be so uplifting and inspiring. Because the week before Debbie went into her final 4th treatment center, what drove her there was her addiction was Percodan and cocaine. And she had gone through a bottle of 1,000 Percodan pills and an ounce of cocaine in under 1 week. And she knew that if she didn't go into treatment, she was going to die. So she went into that final center when she was 28, and she died when she was 57.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's so much of people needing to hear that relation, because someone who's been that's a low. And so if that,
It was amazing that she survived that. She was amazed that she survived it. And then, of course, she writes in the book about how embarrassed she was to call her drug dealer, because she didn't even want him to know,
mm-hmm.
The consumption of drugs had escalated to something like that.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we continue? Like, that's my intention with this episode, is just to really help bring this book to people who have family members who may be in recovery or are recovering themselves, and just to realize,
The truth is, we're all addicts.
Totally.
We have addictions, we have soft addictions, we have emotional addictions. So, some are worse than others. The opioid thing, and when you're stealing money to get drugs, of course, that's an extreme side of it. But there's no question 99% of us are addicted to sugar and caffeine and to one-click shopping on Amazon and all of our screens, to the dopamine hits that we're getting from our screen. I mean, it's now something like the average adult is spending 4 hours a day in front of a screen.
I believe it.
Just imagine what you could be doing with 4 hours a day if you weren't checking your phone, or you weren't on social media, and you were actually loving the people you say are the most important people in your life. So when I say,
and it's also like, that's the mask of like going in deeper. And that's why doing the shadow of like, what is that masking, and where do you need to bring in more love?
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention, in case anybody's interested, the shadow process still exists. It still lives on. You can just go to debbieford.com and learn about it. And there's one coming up in Los Angeles in mid-April.
Perfect.
If anybody really wants to, do the super deep work, and it's a very intense weekend, but it will change your life. It's the last workshop you'll ever need to do.
That brings tears to my eyes, because I just feel like there's so many people out there that are trying and trying and trying to really conquer it. And her work has just been, again, so profound for me. I talk about it all the time, and even the work that you do. And I just wanted to say thank you again for doing this and for listening. And I knew she wouldn't let you pass it. You're sending this book out, and I just feel like this book, like, it's so profound and it's so beautiful, and I haven't been able to really put it down, just because it hits the core.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful book. And if anybody in your audience is single and they don't want to be single anymore, just go over to my website, soulmatesecret.com.
Which is a great book.
Yeah, thank you. And I've got some live events coming up. I'll be at Esalen in May 11th through the 13th for a live workshop. And I've got a bunch of stuff on the site that's free. So just get over to soulmatesecret.com if you're looking for love.
Yay. Thank you so much, Arielle. Like I said, like this is such an honor and I'm so grateful. And this is kind of like a bucket list dream come true. So thank you so
All right,
much.
well, hopefully I'll see you in Encinitas.
Yes, we will. And again, Your Holiness, everyone should go grab it. It's such a beautiful book that's really going to help you transmute that darkness into light, and because you already are that. So we want to thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy and have a great rest of your time. Bye.